We'll look at, in front of you, you've got the agenda tonight, but Reverend Brown, do you mind giving us just a moment of silence and blessing tonight?
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Brown.
Heavenly Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for all who are assembled here and those who are on their way. You allowed each of us to win an election because you saw something in all of us that when united, we could do great things for our school district. Bless the attorney, bless all of us who are here, and guide us and pour out wisdom upon us so we can make the right decisions and understand everything that's about to be taught. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Brown. If you'll look at item 3, notification of tonight's meeting, Ms. Goss. Thank you, Ms. Goss. I know you always take care of that. Also, we do have an established quorum. I know that Mr. Hill will not be with us due to some health issues. But with that being said, we have a small group. I just want to welcome everybody tonight. It's actually afternoon, I understand that, but we feel like it's really nice that we can just kind of move right into our next meeting. So I hope everybody's ready with questions and interest because this is really important to follow up. So again, thank you everyone tonight. How are you? Hope everything's good. So I didn't get to speak earlier, but let's move to item number 5, approval of the agenda. What is the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
Thank you, Reverend Brown. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. White. We have a motion properly second. Let's bring it to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the agenda is approved. Let's move now to the reason that we're here. And I just have to say, Mr. Ziegler, we really were impressed with our last meeting, but I know that we have more questions for you and there'll probably be more to come, but we really appreciate you being with us this afternoon. So we're gonna let you, the podium is right here. We moved you up. We normally have it back, but we moved you up so you could be close to us, and we're just ready to hear what you have to share.
Thank you very much for having me, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Fay. Always happy to come across the river and see my friends in Marion and talk about funding our public schools, which is one of the most important things that I work on in my professional life. Really enjoyed being with you in Mullins a few weeks ago and talking about what might be involved in putting on another capital sales tax in Marion County, this time for education. And I'm happy to come back and talk about it some more and answer any questions you might have. If I may, Madam Chair, I'll start by sort of going over again what we talked about when I was with you a few weeks ago in Mullins. Like all districts in South Carolina, particularly districts in the PD and our more rural areas, y'all have capital needs that are hard to fill based on your 8% assessed value. You've got an 8% debt limit cap under the Constitution, and the 8% debt limit of Marion County is not going to build the schools that you need. So you have to look to alternative sources of funding. And one of the sort of tried and true ways that school districts around the state and PD in particular have used are capital sales taxes. Very similar to the sales tax that you have on now at the county level that are funding good improvements around the county. There are mechanisms to put the same type of sales tax on in the Marion County School District to fund your improvements. And we talked about a little bit about the numbers. That's not my bailiwick. You need to talk to a financial advisor about sizing what you could borrow based on what you've got. But I think talking to the county treasurer, it seems y'all have about anywhere from 3.2 to 3.5 million a year that would come in from a 1-cent sales tax like the one that the county has on. So the question is, how do you get one on? How would the county go about imposing a sales tax? Again, right now y'all have a sales tax that's on at the county level. That's put on pursuant to the county capital project sales tax in Chapter 10 of Title 4. Used to be until a few years ago, and there was a Supreme Court case that I won't go into the details of involving Dorchester County School District, but it used to be we would do special acts of the legislature to authorize sales taxes. Marlboro County is an example of one that was done that allowed Marlboro to put on a sales tax. And special acts of the legislature have traditionally been allowed post-home rule, post-1970 home rule amendments, 70s home rule amendments, because school districts are different. They are actually governed by the General Assembly. They're not home rule jurisdictions. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court, in a very ill-advised opinion a number of years ago, called into question the ability of the legislature to do local legislation for school districts. So that's pretty much shut down special legislation. That's the bad news. The good news is there is a statute, and it's called the Education Capital Improvement Sales Tax Act, that is immediately follows. If you open up the statute book, it is the next section after the County Act, and it allows a school district to put on a 1 cent sales tax, basically the same mechanism you use for a county. You have a referendum, come up with you don't have to appoint a commission like you do with the county, but you have a referendum, and the bonds that are issued, you approve the sales tax, you approve the bonds, and those bonds are paid from the sales tax that's imposed in the district. In this case, it would be Marion County, all of Marion County. The term of the sales tax is 15 years. On county, it's 8 initially, and then 7 if it's renewed. For school district, it's 15 years. So that's good. You can borrow an amount. If you leverage 15 years worth of $3.5 million, that gets you up into the 20 some odd, 30 some odd $million range. So that's meaningful. Certainly going to build you a school and not multiple schools, but it's very helpful in getting you where you need to be in terms of keeping up with even just your deferred maintenance. So the question is, do y'all fit within the categories that the Education Capital Sales Tax Act allows? I think I told you the Educational Capital Sales Tax, when it was passed 25 years ago, was basically passed for 2 school districts, Horry and Charleston, because it put a threshold that you can only have the referendum if you are a school district in a county that's got, I can't remember, I have to look in the statute, but it's several $1 million in hospitality tax collections. Now, there's no rational connection between hospitality taxes and schools, but it was a way for the legislature to enact something for those 2 counties. I'm sorry, for those 2 counties, and not have it say it was just for those 2 counties. So they enacted it, and Horry and Charleston got to use it, and that was great. And of course, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. What the legislature did after that, I think I mentioned this to you, I call it the cavalcade of carve-outs. They started amending the statute occasionally to add categories that basically described a particular school district without actually describing that school district. For instance, one of them says that if you're a countywide school district that encompasses a portion of a neighboring county, that's one school district. That's Cherokee County School District. That was Senator Peeler did that just for Cherokee County. So they started putting all these little carve-outs, and some people call it Christmas trees. You're hanging another ball on a Christmas tree. So the question is, would a Christmas tree type carve-out work for Marion? Could we come up with something that you could put into the hands of your capable legislative delegation? They could take to Columbia and say, we want to amend the Education Capital Sales Tax Act to add this, and that would give you all the opportunity to have a referendum. And so met with Dr. Bethea and Ms. White months ago now, and we talked to Senator Williams, and the idea we came up with was to offer an amendment at this next legislative session. We had 2 different approaches to it. How could we come up with something that would describe Marion? The narrower you can make it, the easier it is to get through the legislature. If you can save these people, look, we're not opening the floodgates. We're just doing this for 1 or 2, just like they did with Horry and Charleston. And 2 ideas I had. One was that we make it, if you're a countywide school district, if you're a school district that encompasses the entire county, and your county is in the bottom 10 or 20, I think in Marion, we'd have to go up to 20, the bottom 20 counties in assessed value, then you can have a referendum on a sales tax. And that actually has a substantive connection, because what you're saying is we have capital needs, but our assessed value is so low that we need to turn to a sales tax to fit to fill those needs. So I like that very much. If you needed to narrow it a little more, you could say that it's your school district that encompasses the entire county, and you border one of those counties that has the high amount of hospitality taxes. Well, of course, that would fit for Marion because you border Horry County. So we got several possible approaches, but what would happen, I want to talk about what would happen legislatively, how you would get this through. And then I want to talk about what this would mean if you did get a referendum, if you got the legislation approved, what that would take, then what the impact that would have in terms of things you got to keep in mind in terms of the county having a sales tax on and other things. And then I want to talk to you about, I know there were some concerns about cost, and I want to allay some of your fears that this might be an expensive process, because candidly, it really isn't, unless you need to go out and hire a lobbyist or something like that, which I've worked with Kent Williams on legislation, and he is very good at getting stuff like this through. And, he probably saved Dillon County, tens of thousands of dollars in lobbyist fees just because he knew how to navigate this through. But let's talk about how this would work. So if we went to Senator Williams and your delegation and said, we would like to have you get this amendment to the education capital sales tax introduced and shepherded through. And we structured it in one of those ways I mentioned, countywide school district with the lowest 20 assessed values, and maybe even narrow it a little bit more, maybe hold back the narrowing it to adjacent to a rich county. You could offer that maybe as a compromise if somebody in the legislature challenged it. But you would take that and it would be introduced, it could be pre-filed in the legislature in December. That's the earliest it could even be taken to Columbia. It's pre-filed in December. When the legislature convenes, comes into session in January, because this is comprehensive legislation, this isn't a local act. If it were a local act, we could still do those. It would just be your delegation. We'd get it through in a week if the delegation was amenable. Because this is statewide comprehensive legislation, it would have to go to a committee, Senate Finance Committee. That'd be great because Senator Williams is on the Senate Finance Committee, or the Education Committee, but it would have to go to a committee and have to get reported out of a committee, and then voted on. It go to the Senate floor, and then go to the House and go to committee. So, you'd be looking at best case scenario, getting it passed in February or March. But more than likely, I looked back this morning, I looked at all of the old carve outs, all the old Christmas tree balls that they've hung, and some of them have taken until July to get done. Some of them take till the end of the term. And then you get to the end of the term, or you get late in the process, and you got to say, well, is the governor going to veto this? Are the anti-tax people going to come out of the woodwork and say, oh, you can't do this, this is the end of the world, this is not what good conservatives like you, governor, do, and so you have to deal with all that. So there's no certainty, but I think you would have to assume that it would be late spring, early summer before you would get legislation that would allow you to have to a referendum. Once that happens, if we're fortunate enough and God willing we get it done, then you've got until the 15th of August to have the referendum question framed, because it has to go to the state law, so it has to go to the election committee by the 15th of August if it's going to go on the ballot in general election. That shouldn't be a problem. I would recommend, if you decide to go forward with the legislation, it's looking good, go ahead and start doing your legwork, have a resolution ready. As soon as it passes, boom, you pass the resolution and you move on to the approving your referendum question and sending it to the state election commission. And then you would have your referendum this fall, and the sales tax would go on in the spring of 2025, when you'd have the referendum next fall, go on, and it would be on for 15 years. So it would go to 2040. And then you would be able to project how much you're collecting, and you'd be able to issue bonds that would, you would actually put the amount of bonds before you had the referendum. You would get a financial advisor to project what your sales tax revenues would be on an annual basis. That's basically your car payment you can make. That tells you how nice a car you can afford. Then you would size your the bonds, you put in the referendum question, not only the sales tax, but the issuance of general obligation bonds by the district. And that sales tax is used to pay the bonds. You don't put the millage on. You use the millage in lieu you use the sales tax in lieu of the millage to pay the bonds. That's the way these sales tax deals work. So all that happens and you're able to issue the bonds, you go out and you borrow $20 or $30 million and you got some money to work with. So that's sort of the end result of all this. Now, one of the things you got to keep in mind is this would put Marion with an extra 2 cents with a county capital project sales tax and a school district capital sales tax. Now, I don't think 2 cents is onerous. I think good schools and good county facilities are worth paying 2 pennies on the dollar. But I don't have to tell y'all are public servants, you have to answer to the electorate. Some people scream bloody murder about 1 cent, let alone 2 cents. And I don't have to tell the chair that, the county had to push their side through. So in talking to the chair, I'm very encouraged to know that you wouldn't really be in conflict with the county, that this would more than likely be something. The county sales tax expires in 2026. So the county would be going on the ballot the next year. And I was thinking driving over here, wow, if you put this together sort of a combined pitch, the county and the school district, a 1-2 punch, the school district's going to get a penny and the county's going to come back and get their penny, and you're really going a long way toward addressing the needs in Marion County. That could be a great way to handle it. So, you really just need to be mindful that what y'all do is going to affect the county and vice versa, but I'm glad to hear there's a spirit of cooperation involved in that. So that's great. In terms of cost, this is not an expensive process. I've already drafted the legislation. I got it right here. I handed it out. That took me less than an hour to draft the legislation. Once you hand it to Senator Williams, he gets it through. There's really no cost involved in that. Now I asked a lobbyist, I called a lobbyist today because I was trying to think, okay, if the district had to hire a lobbyist, if Senator Williams needed some help with people in the House or whatever. And I asked this lobbyist, I said, how much, I don't even know what lobbyists charge these days. I don't know, y'all may have a lobbyist. I know District 1 in Florence has a lobbyist, but I said, how much would it cost? Well, he wouldn't answer my question, surprise, surprise. But he said, first of all, he said, this is Marion. I said, yeah. He said, well, Kent Williams could get this through if anybody could get it through. I said, well, that's good to hear. He said, and if Senator Williams feels like, and I would certainly take my cues from him and the others in your legislative delegation, if they say, this is liable to take some work, I would identify the other school districts who might be in your boat and say, hey, this is going to help us all. Let's hire a lobbyist and kick in a few $1,000s each. And I would think from the way this fellow was talking, that it would probably cost you $10,000 to $20,000 to have a lobbyist handle this. But if you had 2 or 3 school districts, that would of course split that cost up. But you may not need a lobbyist. But that's just, I wanted to let y'all know that if you have, I'm not a lobbyist. I don't go up and advocate for legislation. Now I do go and sometimes testify and speak to legislation that I'm knowledgeable about, but I'm not the sort of person who gets stuff through. But there are people out there who could do it, but that would be an added expense. But in terms of what we do, the legislation's done. Senator Williams gets through. The next step would be a referendum. That's not a huge amount of work, and it's usually work that we get paid for if the referendum passes and bonds are issued. So you don't need to worry about me being on the clock, or this is not a horrendously expensive process. Now, when you issue bonds, we come in and we serve as your bond counsel. We're the ones who oversee the whole process of issuing the bonds, make sure you're compliant with all the state laws and regulations, all the federal tax regulations, securities laws. You have to do a big offering memorandum. It's a pretty good amount of work that goes into that, but that gets paid out of the bond proceeds. That doesn't come out of school operating funds or whatever. No, I've had a couple of clients who preferred to pay the costs out of pocket, but that's just not very efficient. So we tend to get paid out of the bond proceeds, and the bonds are sold on our opinion. So we sort of almost in effect insure the bonds to the bondholders. So we're like providing an insurance policy as to their legality and their effectiveness and enforcement. So I don't see this being something that's going to cost you much, if anything. I think it's worth, if the political will is there, if y'all feel like this is something good to do, if, 25 or $30 million is worth going after. And you are simpatico with the county and with the other political leadership, I say refine this legislation that I've got, which won't take much more time, get it to Senator Williams and say, pre-file it, and let's see what happens. So I think y'all are approaching this the right way. I think y'all are being very careful and very deliberate. And I'll tell you, I've worked on a lot of referenda in my time, not just sales tax referenda, but also bond referenda. And that's another thing you can do. You could do a bond referendum. You could go to the public and say, we need to borrow $75 million. And here's what it's going to cost in mills. And they could approve the issuance of $75 million in bonds. Those get paid from property taxes. You won't have the sales tax to pick that up. Now, I will tell you, little old Johnsonville School District 5 down in Lower Florence County, we did a referendum in August. And it was for $7.5 million. That's what they needed to they have 3 schools. They have an elementary school, middle school, and a high school. And that was all deferred maintenance on those schools. And it was I want to say it was about a 30 mil increase. Big deal, 30 mils on a $100,000 house is about $120 a year. So not insignificant. And it passed 75-25. And I'm going next week to talk to another small school district down below Florence. And then the week after that, another one. So I think the tide is changing a little bit on, Florence. We got our clock cleaned in the last referendum we did. It lost 75-25. And there was a real sense that we didn't have our act together and we weren't planning properly. And there was division as to who gets a new high school, what area of town gets a new high school over others. And it was just I won't say it's a comedy of errors, but it was a disaster. And it's sort of a cautionary tale, and that was also at a time where there was just a lot of antagonism. I think people are realizing now that, a place like Johnsonville, they're not asking for a brand spanking new high school or ball fields or anything fancy. They're just asking for new roofs, paint, sidewalks, parking lots. And that's just what you got to do to get by. So I think people are starting to understand that 8% debt capacity in a place like Marion or a place like Johnsonville isn't gonna keep up with your needs. And I think people are more sympathetic, at least they are over on my side of the river. So I know y'all do the right thing. And if y'all do a referendum, whether it's a sales tax referendum or a bond referendum, I've got a lot of experience working, there are state ethics act limitations you've got to. I've talked to the chairman's husband about this 2 or 3 times. I come in and say, here's what you can do and can't do as a school district and a school board to advocate, or you can advocate as a school district and school board, but here's what you can do to provide information. Here's how you structure a citizens committee, that kind of stuff. And then, working with the right people to make sure you get the right message out there. So with that, I will stop and answer any questions y'all might have.
All right, do we have anybody that has questions?
Can you explain the difference between the bond referendum and the, like you said, capital one?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain?
So a bond referendum, now you've got that 8% debt limit. It says the Constitution, Article 10 of the South Carolina Constitution says that you cannot have outstanding at any one time bonded indebtedness bonds in excess, an amount in excess of 8% of your assessed value. So if your assessed value is $100 million, you can only have $8 million outstanding in any one time unless it's approved by referendum. If it's approved by referendum, you can have. So let's say you needed to borrow $25 million. That's $17 million more than your debt limit. You could take that to the voters, and if they approve it, then that cap doesn't apply. The capital sales tax is a different structure where you go to the public and say, we'd like to put on a 1-cent sales tax. Of course, the bonds, the 8% debt limit is designed to protect the property taxes. Those bonds are paid from property taxes. The education capital sales tax, you go to the voters and say, we want to put on a sales tax that you pay at the store, and it usually exempts unprepared food, but everything else is subject to sales tax. I think this one does exempt unprepared food. We want to put on a sales tax, and we also want to issue that same $25 million in bonds, but instead of levying property taxes to pay those bonds, it's going to be paid from the sales tax.
What happened in Florence, was it last year?
A couple of years ago with the referendum,
Something they were trying to pass and it failed.
Woo! Big time.
I had to explain to my sister, she lived in that district.
Yeah.
And she regretted how she voted
Mm.
after the talk. And the people woke up, they were shocked that they really killed something that should have passed.
Yeah, it was just, I don't know how to describe it to you. The school district's my client. I was educated by those schools over there, so I'm very loyal to District 1. You know, the one thing you gotta have, and this isn't a problem that y'all have, you know, District 1, they were talking about building multiple new schools and ball fields and all that stuff. When you got that sort of situation, you gotta make sure everybody is happy with what they're getting. There's no dissent on the school board. There's no dissent in the communities. Everybody says, okay, we're satisfied with what we're gonna get from this. And that didn't happen. And so there was dissent within the district, but there was also, I guess that was sort of early kind of Trump movement years. There were all these sort of anti-tax people out in the county, and they just killed it. And it just kind of took on a life of its own. There was a lot of misinformation. You know, one of the things these bigger, my late friend James Schofield, who was chairman of Florence County Council, who's one of the best people I've ever worked with, when we did our capital sales tax referendum, he made sure he had the best, you know, he got all the industries and the leaders in the community to put money in to create a community group that advocated, and they hired good ad people, and they did everything right. That's what you got to do, and keep misinformation from spreading. So, yeah, but the good news is, you know, y'all aren't going and asking for the moon. Y'all are just asking for basics. Y'all are asking for, y'all would be, I'm assuming, Dr. Faye, I'm assuming y'all would be asking for pretty simple stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Just getting by.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I think we, anybody, I mean, anyone before?
Yes,
Yeah. Thank you.
what would you prefer? You the expert for Marion County, you know, with whole district. I mean, what would you prefer? Yeah, what we tackle right now, like with the capital sales tax and.
You talk about capital sales tax versus just a GO bond?
Yeah.
I mean, whenever you can put that on burden on, and well, two things. I mean, a sales tax is a regressive tax.
Gotcha.
You know, basically everybody pays the same thing. And there's some people who think that's just. I tend to think that property taxes have a little more, you know, you pay more, those who have more pay more. People don't like that for property taxes. So sales tax is regressive. A lot of people don't like a sales tax, but you know, where we live, I think in Florence, the estimates have always been that for every dollar in sales taxes that's collected in Florence because of I-95, because of I-20, because of the beach, same people are getting off coming through here, that 30 cents of every dollar paid by people outside the county. And y'all would have some percentage of that. So putting, you know, if you do just the regular bond referendum, that's going to be paid by your resident property tax, your resident property owners. If you do it with sales tax, that's going to be paid by people in Marion at the store, but it's also going to be paid by the fella who stops from Ohio, who stops to get gas, you know, up there at PD or Galvin's Ferry or wherever.
Gotcha.
Well, actually, Galvin's Ferry would be on the other side of the river, so no. It's just people who are traveling back and forth. So.
Did have one question.
Yes.
We presently have a GO bond. Would that have to go away or does that continue on?
It would continue on. Your
Okay.
GO bonds sort of get layered on top of each other.
Okay.
And they have, so yeah, you know, your capacity, last time I was with you, I looked at your capacity and I'm sorry, I can't remember. If you didn't have a referendum, if y'all had to go out and borrow, I want to say y'all might could borrow a few $1 million based on what you got outstanding. Your total capacity wasn't much, but no, your existing bonds, other than the fact that if you go to the public in a referendum and you're saying it's going to cost you 30 mils to pay this bond. Well, that's 30 mils on top of what you've already got. But what you've already got, I think, was pretty short term. So it's coming off in the next few years.
Anybody else, Susan, right now? I mean, go ahead and let it percolate.
And again, y'all can call me back anytime you want me to. I'm happy to come and talk, and as ideas develop and sit down and
I think, I mean, I do feel like the time is getting ready to be right. Our county did a strategic plan. How long ago was that, Dr. Bethay? About 5 years ago? Has it been
About-
5? Because it was
it's been
before
about-
COVID.
It was probably about a good 4 years ago.
Probably 5, 6 years ago, and then COVID kind of put a halt.
Mhm.
And then when we had our annual meeting, that was brought up again. And in that strategic plan, it states, and I can't remember who did the plan for us. We got,
Boyette Company.
and so their recommendation was for a county high school. And so we know that sits on the minds of people already, but we were definitely not ready for that.
And that's
Because-
that's $100 million plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So knowing that, I don't know that we won't get close to being ready because it's coming back. That strategic plan was announced again, that they're going to revisit it and really start pinpointing some of the goals on that strategic plan. I think some of the concern in our community is that you have people that would be good with building a high school, and then you've got some naysayers that are kind of like mules. They'll sit down to it and
Sure.
not budge. And you need those naysayers. We've got to get them to get on board with us. So I think what's critical for us to go forward with even looking at a project that large. I'm not saying that we're going to look at a project that large, that we might, because we haven't even discussed why we want it and, and what do we want to spend it on? And that's, to me, is the next critical
You
piece
gotta
for
have-
the
you gotta have-
board to do, is say, here's our
Absolutely.
wish list.
Yep.
This is the first thing, here's the second thing, here's the third, and then make the decision of how high up on that ladder can we move. But our school district as a whole is old. I mean, it has old buildings that need a lot of adjustment and probably need to see
Yeah. Well.
the death of that building. I shouldn't say that, should I? But we do. We have a lot that don't serve our children well. And I keep rolling that back. So I think that the message that this board puts out has to be, first of all, we have to commit to it, but we need the county.
Sure.
We need everybody sitting on that county council to say, yes, this is how we need to move forward. So I know that piece is going to take some work with a lot of concentrated thought on how to get the message. And our legislator, Senator Williams and Representative Atkinson, I mean, we need them to be speaking the message as loudly as we are.
Yeah.
With that being said, and listening to what you said today, there's no question in my mind that the first place to start is that legislative piece where
There's
I don't
no, is this not gonna hurt you? The worst that can happen is it goes to Columbia and doesn't make it through. If it makes it through, then you've got an option.
I think that would be a big selling point for us.
Yeah.
But I feel like, what are all our selling points to get people to be part of the buy-in?
Right. Well, I think the fact that if you do get the county and school district working together, this is a comprehensive plan. We're not gonna come back. And if the county's getting ready to come on for another sales tax in a year, y'all could go on this coming fall. Y'all could, combine your message and say, this is I use that phrase, this is a 1-2 punch on our needs. We're going to do schools, we're going to do county facilities, we're going to do, I don't know what the county would have in mind this go around, whether it's law enforcement or fire or other infrastructure, but absolutely. I think if you have the county and the school district working together, that's very powerful. And the voters respect that.
Any questions?
I have one more.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Attorney, in school districts where you have private school
Right.
and their parents vote too,
Mhm.
do they work with the public school when they want to build new school? Have you seen any vision? I mean, the farmers created, Florence has a whole lot of
Yeah.
schools, and that's a lot of vote.
Yeah, I never have really delved into that. I don't think in terms of a percentage of the population, it's enough to really make a difference. And the people who are enlightened realize if you're wealthy and sophisticated and you're sending your kids to private school, you should be smart enough to realize that your public schools enhance your property values, they enhance your employment situation, that, I might choose to send my child to a private school, but I recognize we got to have good public schools and I'm gonna vote in favor. So I don't really see a lot of opposition from, what you see a lot, and this is the most misguided, is the, older people who say, well, why should I vote for this? I don't have children. That's, that's pretty short-sighted, but yeah.
Another, do we need to be concerned with the possible passing of the voucher? Is that will that impact?
Yeah, well, I hope that this would be, vouchers would be something that if it came out of Columbia would be revenue neutral to school districts. It would be state funds, that you would be taking state monies and applying it toward a voucher, just like the state funds were applied toward school district operating to give local property tax relief. I don't think it's going to affect, well, I don't think it would immediately affect the attitude toward something like this unless and until more people take the voucher. And I don't know if y'all would have the capacity in Marion for people to take vouchers and go someplace else. You never know, but it certainly would not be positive, but I don't know that it would help you or it would hurt you that much. Yeah.
So I know you've been through this process. If we begin this process, can we create a timeline of
Yeah.
exactly when we're meeting?
I
who
almost
we're
did,
meeting
I
with,
almost did a timeline for y'all just to kind of say, there's so much uncertainty as to the legislative process. Again, this could go through in 6 weeks, this could take 3 or 4 months, but leading up to say pre-filing date, which is usually December 15th, meet with county council, meet with the chamber, meet with the economic development people, meet with pastors and other community leaders. And then, have Representative Atkinson and Senator Williams along, with you. But then finally, the last thing you do is you sit down with them and say, here's the legislation people in Marion want.
we have any questions or any?
Well, I'm always available. You got my number now.
Yeah.
So call me and I'll be happy to come back over and I'll be with you every step of the way if you need me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is it the pleasure of the board to move into executive session?
For what?
Just to discuss
Yeah. You want me to go?
the process. We haven't adjourned
Yeah.
into executive session. Does anybody,
Didn't he have
because it would be contractual,
I thought he had the legislation.
a
Madam Chair,
contract, yes.
Did he have, Attorney Ziegler have a copy of the legislation that you can have a copy of?
You want, I have several, I have what I drafted previously, I handed this out previously. If y'all want to just take these and highlight it, this is the full text of the statute. And at the end, the yellow is what I would add. That would be-
Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
I'll leave y'all and let y'all talk.
All right.
Thank y'all.
Thank
Good being
you.
with you.
Thank you, Mr. Steve.
Yes, ma'am. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
session. The last piece is open session before we adjourn this meeting. Any more discussion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make a motion that we go forward with the information that Ben Ziegler presented to us to go to our legislators with what is it?
To
The
pre-file.
referendum, the
Pre-file of a bill.
pre-filing.
What capital sales tax, what you talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
With him and the senator working together to get this stuff.
Yes,
going.
ma'am.
I go along with that.
Thank you,
So-
ma'am.
So that's, you're saying to move forward with the capital sales tax?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And not just the legislative amendment?
Well, that would be.
They're two
part-
separate things. So legislative amendment and then,
No,
That's the first
the information that he has to present to the legislators is part of the capital sales piece. So that's part of it. Right now, we're ineligible. So and because of the time and all this other stuff. So in order for us to be eligible for an educational capital sales tax act, we have to present it before our legislators for that capital sales tax. We're not talking about GO bonds. We're talking about capital sales tax. And as he laid it out, we have to take it before our legislators, and then Senator Williams would have to advocate for us and change that and add us in, as he said, the Christmas tree thing. So that was part of it.
I have a question. Are we gonna hire him as our attorney? Is he our
Well-
attorney now? Or he's just giving us
Well-
advice?
that's why we need to, is that part of the motion?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so can you write that motion out so we have clarity and then we'll open it up for discussion? Because,
Y'all just lost it. Did we hire him or not? Or he's just giving us consultation?
well, we have two pieces sitting on this, correct, Dr. Bethea?
There were, he talked about his schedule and he gets paid through bonds if a
Right.
project passes. But there are two options to make sure that the board has clarity. Regardless, it would have to go to a referendum, whether it be sales tax or a GO bond. With the sales tax, the pre-filing is the first step towards the sales tax component. And I think that's what Ms. White is asking about. But in terms of the work that he's done thus far, when you stepped out, he shared that the cost of this pre-work is non-existent. The costs come into factor when a project or a bond is passed, and they get paid out of the percentage, I think he
Right. I
stated.
remember him saying that in Mullins. I just want to know, will he be our representative for this project? Are we using him? Are we motioning for him, or did we already decide?
I'll make it clear. That's what I'm asking for,
okay.
for us to hire Ben Ziegler to present the pre-filing to our legislators for us to do this capital sales tax.
That's what I was wondering.
Okay.
I knew all that from Mullins.
Okay.
I think what I'm confused about is there's two pieces here. One is the educational capital improvement sales, where they changed the legislation, which would be the first thing that he would pay for.
That's how you go on executive session.
Yeah,
Madam Chair, can I motion to go into executive session, please? Cause you have questions, so she's not gonna vote. We're not gonna vote. We gotta vote, right?
well, we can go into executive session for the contract for hiring somebody for that discussion. So, and then we can come back out for a motion to put the whole package together, because there's two pieces going on here. Well, technically three. Do we hire him? The other is to get Representative Atkinson and Senator Williams to bring forth the amendment to the section 1 of section 410, 470 code to make changes to G 1 and 2. So that was the one that they would go forth and work to get those changes so that we could secure the possibilities of getting parts of those taxes that are produced because of, I wrote this down and my mind just went blank. Because of our border to Horry County being able to get some of that tax money. Then the second piece would be to move forward with a capital sales tax as opposed to a bond. So there's two things that he brought forth.
Actually, he bought one. Well, the two would have been capital sales tax or GO bond. Those are your two options. Not, if we ask him, and please bump in there and straighten me out, Reverend Brown. If we hire him to do this, he's being hired to present this pre-filing to, at least that's my motion, to present the pre-filing to the legislators. And after that if it is accepted, then we do a capital sales tax. So that's one option. The other option is a GO bond, which I am not in favor of. And that's not my motion. My motion is to hire Ben Ziegler to do the pre-filing with our legislators so that if it is approved by the state, that we can do a capital sales tax. One option. That's one option. Am I right?
That's right.
Thank you.
You put it all together as one.
It's one thing, right?
Okay, well, we can just move on and then decide whether to vote on it. Because I'm totally confused because I understood when I spoke to him that there were technically two pieces to this. One is if we didn't do the sales tax, at least move forward with this piece here. He said, you want to at least do this and move forward with this. And I'm obviously I'm wrong. I've misunderstood that. And then the second piece would be the GO bond versus the sales tax. And that would be a whole separate situation. So Dr. Bethea,
And just see if I can provide some clarity. The pre-filing is just the first step. And so he would work on with the board to present this to delegation to get approval for a pre-filing. If a pre-filing happens and it is accepted, then at that time, the board and a decision will need to be made whether or not it needs to go to a ballot, but at least you will have approval to go. Right now, you can do nothing because you do not meet the state criteria as currently outlined.
okay.
And so if you move forward, at least getting the state guidance changed so that you're eligible. I guess that's the word I can use. So it makes you
Okay,
eligible.
that clarifies
sense?
it. So that the change, getting them to take it to legislation is
Yes.
offering our eligibility.
There you go.
Okay, that's the word I was looking for.
That's it.
Okay, now that there's clarity there. Okay. So can we, I'm gonna put it back with you, Ms. White, and if we can get that word eligibility in there, pre-filing, then that's up to you. What you bring
Okay,
forward
yeah.
is how I'm gonna vote.
Yes, ma'am. My motion remains the same. I'm making a motion to hire Ben Ziegler so that he can present a pre-filing before our legislators so that we can do a capital sales tax. That's my motion. So you vote it up or you vote it down, or somebody cannot say anything as far as the second, but that's my motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
I second it.
All right, we have a second from Reverend Brown. We'll open it up for discussion. Any discussion? I still have just some reservation.
There's a motion on the floor, Madam Chair.
But we have discussion. It's open for
Right.
discussion. So anybody, I'm trying to,
You need more clarity, like,
I think the purpose of just the process of understanding that we are the whole process piece.
Madam Chair, may I make a comment? I
Yes,
guess we
ma'am,
open for
please.
discussion. I
This
think
is when
that
we get to discuss.
where we're at, we just gotta get it to our representatives, our legislation, get them to correct the language that's on the legislation that's already out there. Once they
Correct.
correct it, then we're eligible to even apply for this, so it's not really
Or
saying,
consider it.
right,
Yeah.
or be considered.
Yeah,
It's not really saying that, hey, you have to do this. You, first of all, you have to get in the game to even be a part
I
of it.
think that's
So I think that's what it is. The only question I have, the only discussion part I have is, and I'm taking it from your opinions with the lawyer, he's the best at it. So that's the only thing I don't know if he's the right person, but I'm good with that. Other than that, I'm for it. I know that normally y'all want some options and we just going with Mr. Ziegler.
Okay.
I'm good with it.
Anybody else?
Reverend Brown, I see you shaking your head. I said something you didn't like.
Well, yes, she explained it, and the chair asked her to clarify it. I heard the chair say she now understood it.
Mhm.
And she
And
said
so
she
I'm
still
kinda
did.
like, well, why are we still talking? She did say, I understand it after the superintendent explained it, right?
Mhm.
You made the motion, I seconded it. And I thought we'd already had the pre-discussion, and we were now just voting.
Well, I'm just following, Robert's rules. So with no more discussion, we'll bring it to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? So the ayes have it and the motion carries. Now, any other questions? What is the pleasure of the board?
I'll move if we have nothing else to do. Can we adjourn this meeting?
Yeah.
I'm motion adjourned.
Thank you, Ms. Foxworth. Do we have?
I second it.
Thank you, Ms. White. We have a motion and it's properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we're moving forward.
We're just sitting here waiting on.
Oh,
I know. Oh, is it 5:30?
It's 5:30.
Yeah.
It is.